Hi, my name is Jeremy Stretton and welcome to this presentation on preparing for disaster. So, my name is Jeremy Stretton, as I said in the intro. Please have a look at the workbook and download the PDF workbook that is also on this page. I'm going to reference that workbook, and it's really important that you have a look at that because in this Preparing for Disaster workshop, I want to make sure that you get something out of it and that you have something that you can move forward and to help you prepare yourself for a disaster. So a little bit about me first. So my name's Jeremy Stretton. I'm a lawyer and I'm an entrepreneur. So I am one of the owners of SMS Law, which is based in Caboolture and also in Morningside in Brisbane. And my law firm, we started that back in 2011, and we really enjoy working with business owners and helping business owners to achieve the life that they want to live. My purpose is to help business owners to really achieve their goals, because if we can help them to achieve their goals and help them through and solve their legal problems, then they can build great businesses that makes their communities and the world a better place. So I also run other businesses. I run a consulting business where I have a mastermind, an online mastermind and coaching business. And this talk is all about preparing for disaster from a legal perspective, but I will bring in a few bits of business advice and things like that are also relevant for business owners. So I wanted to start out with this statistic. So we're recording this presentation in July 2020. So if you're watching this in a few years' time, you may have forgotten or maybe we're still going through it, the COVID-19, the coronavirus, corona crisis, whatever you want to call it, disaster, where businesses have been shut down, whole industries have been told to shut down, businesses are shut down, the government is pumping so much money into the economy. And the reason I reference that, even though that may be something that may have passed for you, is that these things happen. No one saw this coming. No one saw that a virus was going to come and shut down the world economy. And so few people were prepared for that. And that's where this statistic comes in. And that's that only 37% of business owners have a formal plan for disaster preparation and recovery. Only 37%. And that was taken around the time of the COVID-19 disaster was when that came in. And there are a lot of people, a lot of businesses that were stuck and caught short because they had no plan of what to do in the future. And they made some horrendous decisions that unfortunately will really cost them a lot of money in the future. Because if they don't follow a correct plan and they don't follow all the correct procedures, then that's when the lawyers can get involved and can sue people for lots of money. So I'm going to talk about three different aspects today. I'm going to talk about document management and why that's important and how to do that. I'm going to talk about reviewing your contracts that you have now and looking for specific clauses in those contracts that can really help you to prepare for a disaster occurring. And the final thing is ways to adapt to change. And I'll just say this too, that whilst we're recording this in July 2020 during the COVID-19 crisis, it is important to remember too that different disasters have different elements. So everything we're going to talk about today is important from a disaster point of view, whether it be a flood, whether it be a virus, whether it be a cyclone, let's face it, all manner of things that can befall businesses. So really important that you think about this and don't think that it can't happen, because I think we all thought that 2020 wouldn't happen, and this is where we are now. So document management. This is a really, really important thing to get right. Having documentation of where all your items are, where all of your assets are, what all your contacts are, is really, really important. And that's where the workbook comes in. So I'd like you to get the workbook up. And if you have a look at here, we have a crisis plan template that we've included in this as this workbook. And it is a 20-page document. And it goes through a bunch of different information that you need to have to be able to basically have in place ready for if there's a disaster. So it talks about the details of your business, emergency contacts, who's your attorney, who's your or your power of attorney, I should say, your accountant, your lawyer, your bank manager, your insurance broker, your doctor even can be important. We go through a bunch of them, landlords if you lease premises. Here we've got the space to write the company name, the contact person, their email address, and their phone number. Having this can really help if something happens. I started my business after the 2011 Brisbane floods, but I know plenty of businesses that didn't have this in place and that were drastically damaged in either the floods or in the one of the rain events that happened around that time. And they lost lots of documentation. I know lawyers who lost lots of documentation that was swept away into rivers. Having this information is really, really important, and it's important to store it somewhere that isn't on the business premises. Scan it into your computer and save it on a Dropbox or a Google Drive or something if you've got it, because that's really, really important. We have things like letters of authority. So if you want to give someone else authority to act on your behalf if something happens to you, another important thing. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I just want to go through the first few pages. Information about any finance agreements that you've got. Your insurance details. I can't stress enough how important that is. Even if you've got a broker, have the details of your insurance set out. Details of your lease, your landlord contact details. And this document goes through and reminds you of all the different information that you need to have. And if you have it in a central spot where people can access it, where they can see it, and where they can refer to it, then that will help you if a disaster strikes. So go through it and spend some time, lock off the next hour or two and fill it out, get it done. Another really important part is the staff register. Having all your contact details for your team. I can tell you from personal experience that we had a team member many years ago who didn't turn up to work one day and we didn't have emergency contact details. And unfortunately, she had passed away over the night and we had no way of getting in contact with her. We made sure that we had contact details straight away after that. And I think it's really, really important to have all those details written down so that you know how you can contact people. And that wasn't even a disaster scenario. It was just just general in business. So it's good to have all that information. And then like contact details for your suppliers, lists of your assets. If you're a company that has lots of vehicles, then you want to have all of those details written down so that if something happens, you can track where they are. And then your business functions and all that kind of information. So go through that template, fill it out, and really you have that saved in a space. Make sure multiple people know where it is. As a business owner, the worst thing you can do is hide all of the information about your business in your head, because if something happens to you, it's got to survive what I sometimes call the bus test. It takes one bus to wipe out a person, and you want to make sure that you can survive the bus test. The second part of document management is to keep a backup of all your documents. So there are Dropboxes, Google Drives, many very, very cheap, cost-effective ways of backing up your documents. It doesn't cost a lot to scan things in these days. It might take a little bit of time. Might be a challenge for some people to work out how to use the scanning software, but use the backup facilities that are there to keep backups of your key documents. The amount of times that we see people who don't do that and then something goes wrong, there's a fire, there's a flood, something happens and they can't find key documents, is really sad, because it ends up costing them a lot of money and they can't justify themselves. In 2020, when we're recording this and into the future, it is going to become even easier to store documents and even cheaper. So make sure that you're doing that. So if you haven't done that before, make sure you back up all your documents, put them on a Google Drive, put them on a Dropbox, and make sure that people know where they are, and because they're all stored in the cloud. So that's document management. The second topic I want to talk about is reviewing your contracts. So you might have all sorts of contracts. You'll have employment contracts. You might have supplier contracts. You might have client engagement contracts. You might have leases. All of these documents are designed and can sometimes be called disagreements, because they're designed to tell you what to do if there's a problem between the parties and they don't know what to do. They're to govern the problems that arise. I use the term good contracts make great relationships. And I see that all the time. If you've got a good, well thought out contract, it will help you to resolve any disputes and can often stop disputes before they even arise. So with your contracts, I want to go through 3 key things to look for in the contract to make sure that you're covered. The first one is called a force majeure clause. So that's a fancy term that basically just means that if there's an act of God or something happens that stops you from being able to operate your business, so say with a lease, if you can't access your premises, because of an act of God. There's a fire, there's a flood, there's an earthquake. I think that's unlikely in Queensland, touch wood, but that can happen. Those clauses step in to cancel contracts and give parties the right to suspend contracts or cancel them to help them go forward. Have a look and see whether you've got those clauses. I know a lot of people in this corona crisis didn't have those clauses, and it caused them lots of problems when they weren't able to operate their business. Demolition clauses. Another often missed disaster is what happens if something happens and demolishes a building? So a fire, or a truck hits it if you're near a main road, or any road, or a plane hits it, or anything could hit it. So if the premises are demolished, most leases will contain what's called a demolition clause, which says what will happen if the premises are destroyed. Really, really important that you understand what that says, so that if that does happen, that you know the process and that you can have a process going forward. Rent should be reduced as a minimum, and there should be a process and a time frame for a landlord to actually reinstate the premises and rebuild it in the lease. Have a look at your leases, make sure that stuff's in there because it will protect you going forward. And the final thing is look at your supply agreements. Look at what your obligation is to buy. I think this is something that people miss quite often, and they may have a contract that obliges them under a supply agreement to purchase a certain amount of assets from here or certain things from there, and then if disaster strikes, they've still got that obligation and they've got no contract. We're seeing that time and time again during this corona crisis, and I think that reviewing your supply agreements is, as I said, a very often missed, but a super important part of the contract review process to make sure that you're covered, to make sure that your business is covered so that if something happens, you can cover it. So go through that. There is no part of the workbook for that. That's something that you need to do. And it's also something that if you don't know what a clause says or you're not sure and you're worried, get advice. Talk to your lawyer. Don't go and get barbecue advice. Don't just go, someone else's clause said this, so that's what my clause might say. Every contract, almost every contract is different. Almost every contract has different terms, different facilities in it. So make sure that you get the right advice for your contracts to make sure that you're covered and make sure that you understand what your obligations are. It can't cover every single situation, but it can cover the big ones, and it can cover you if disaster strikes. So make sure that you review your contracts and make sure they're done right. The last topic that I wanted to talk about was your ability to adapt to change. In life in general, change happens. Things change every single day, whether it be just minor changes or whether they be major changes. And your skill to be able to adapt to change as a business owner will be key to you surviving any disaster and really your long-term success as a business owner. Change happens all the time, and there's change curve. I won't go into it too much detail now. There's a change curve that we all go through, where we go through denial when it happens. We get angry about it, and then we finally move into acceptance. And there's a whole process that you go through. But being able to adapt to change is such a crucial skill. And I know for myself that the businesses that I deal with, the ones that I help and consult with, that the ones that were open to adapting to change survived so much better than the ones that weren't able to. So here I want to talk about two different types of change that you need to, or actually one type of change that you need to be really mindful of. And that is changes in legislation. So this is without even thinking about disasters. Legislation can change, and that can cause all sorts of problems for your business. Even when a disaster does strike, legislation can change the way that you thought a relationship could be governed. Again, using the 2020 corona crisis example, everyone had leases, and then businesses that were affected by the shutdowns were able to apply for rent relief from their landlord. And that was a case of legislation that was being brought in to help businesses adapt to change. So you've got to be really, really willing and able to adapt to change, because if you can't, that's when, and you try to just think that everything's going to go back to normal, that's when things won't succeed. And so you need to be willing to embrace change and always get advice. There's with any change, whether it be from a consultant, a lawyer, your accountant, whoever, make sure you're talking to someone. When you're not talking to someone, you often get stuck in your own little bubble and you miss everything. So adapting to change is so super important. It's never going to stay the same. Sorry, it's not. And so you need to be ready for that. So that's what I've got today, those three important topics with preparing for disaster. As I've said before, I'm happy to answer any questions if you've got them. This contact me slide has a web address you can go to, jeremystretton.com/innovate-mb for Moreton Bay. I'd happy to have a chat to you, free half an hour just to talk about anything that's come up for you as part of this, whether you want any advice around disaster planning, whether you want me to have a look at what you've done for your spreadsheet, for your crisis plan. Be happy to review that for you. These are really important things that you have right. And right now we're seeing more than ever that businesses that planned well and that thought these things through survive so much better than the other ones who hadn't. So thank you very much for your time. Have a great day, and I look forward to speaking to you soon. Thank you.